And I've even seen on LinkedIn a lot of posts around what are the right qualifications for a sustainability consultant. I mean, what kind of educational background, what kind of experience should you have, and what kind of job should you do? Because what is proper consulting in sustainability and what's not proper? And I found myself finding some affinity to that, like what I've been doing this for so long, and now a lot of people are coming in and so on. So I've been able to sort of connect to that, but then reflecting on it myself, I'm like, well, it's a straw man. I mean, we're consultants. If we're good at problem solving. And second, this problem is big. And it needs all of us. So it's not going to be sitting and solved with a few highly specialized folks that feel they have the only answer. In fact, like we talked about, I think the solution is making everybody a sustainability consultant.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. In today's episode, we're welcoming a new team member to Green Innovation Group. It is Kristoffer Hvidsteen who is joining us as a director. So in this conversation, I'm trying to tease out a little bit what excites Kristoffer about being part of Green Innovation Group. What is it about decarbonizing the healthcare sector that excites him, and what has taken him to where he is today. He has a lot of experience from the consulting industry and also from the financial sector, and he's been working with sustainability since basically before anyone were working with sustainability in the world. So he did his first carbon accounting in 1994. So he has a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise, and I learn a lot from being in the room with him. So I'm really grateful to have him on board. And without further ado, this is my conversation with Kristoffer to welcome him on board. Hello, Kristoffer. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show. And thanks a lot for taking the time to put me into the sauna before we got here. That was really, really pleasant. If we still have a little bit of red faces and wet hair, then that's the explanation in the case you're wondering out there. This episode is all about bidding you welcome to a little bit more than just the podcast, because you have joined Green Innovation Group as a director, and I'm really excited about that. I know you're really excited about that. Joachim's really excited about that. Les is really excited. Everyone's really excited about that. So I figured we'd spend this episode on getting to know you a little bit more, and also diving into why you found it attractive to join this journey that we're on, and the project that is Green Innovation Group. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to come on the show, but not just come on the show, to take part of the journey of Green Innovation Group. And yes, it was very nice to jump in the harbor, get some cold water all over, and then the sauna.
I chickened out.
So now we're here.
I didn't do the harbor. I feel slightly embarrassed about that, but I promise I'll make it up tomorrow.
Next time.
I wanted to kind of spend this opportunity for our listeners to get to know you and understand sort of what is it that excites you about decarbonizing the healthcare sector, and what have you seen to be challenging, and what is your take on the space of advisory in our sector around decarbonizing the healthcare sector. So maybe a little bit of background first. You've been in many different businesses and industries before joining us, and one of the things I find super impressive is you did your first climate accounting in 1994, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So maybe can you walk us through the journey of how did you end up here?
Well, I mean, it's it's quite a long story, so we're going to cut it short. But that said, I was born in 1972. What's interesting about that was the year of the Stockholm Convention, which is the first time the world gathered to, decide that climate, or environment broadly, climate including, but environment broadly, is an issue we need to tackle together. It was the first time sort of you had an international gathering to sort of say, what are the parameters of doing that? Why is environment important? What do we need to do? And to me, it sort of came on the back of 1968, where you had the Earthrise photo. A lot of people, I think, are familiar with the Earthrise photo, which is taken by one of the Apollo missions. I forget the exact number now, so I don't want to get it wrong, but taken out of the space shuttle, where you see the Earth come up over the horizon. And that is sort of the first manifestation that it's a pretty unique place that we're living in. And the fact that no other planet looks this way. So we better, take care of Planet A, and be on the mission of taking care of Planet A. And that's sort of been the red thread in my career. It's been that I've always cared about how we develop as a society, and especially, how we manage these more difficult issues, right? I mean, the reason we're talking about decarbonization, the reason we're talking about environment is that we haven't been able to tackle it. It's been an issue, since 1972. Before that, but there, at least we congregated to agree, is an issue. And we're still working on it. And fast forward to now, I was out being an entrepreneur for a couple of years. And in those 3 years, preceding 3 years, a lot has happened, I feel. And it's given me, I think, renewed faith. And the fact that we can actually work as consultants with private sector, with public organizations, etc. We can work on solving these issues. As an entrepreneur, I try to address the issues directly. We were reusing large household appliances, instead of buying new, buy a reused one, right, that we've upgraded and that we've repaired, etc. Which was gratifying and interesting, but also tough and rewarding in terms of lessons. But that's why I'm here today, I think, is that okay, there's a change in the market. There's a willingness to...
because before you did work in sustainability consulting. You've been with both Deloitte and Accenture. And
I started out in public sector, where I, amongst other things, did greenhouse gas accounting in the early 90s, which was early days, right? And research-based stuff. And look at a long way we've come now, where satisfyingly, almost everybody's taking this on board now, finally, after, some almost 30 years it took to just understand the impact. Right now, next wave is going to be, how do we address it? Because what I see across the board is there's a lot of need to understand how even scope 1 and 2, what on earth are we going to do? Scope 3, oh my God.
We're still kind of in awareness, but we're not in literacy yet.
No. We're still on the learning curve, but it's interesting to be on the learning curve, because the preceding days, when I was in Deloitte, when I was in Accenture, in the World Bank, or in the financial sector, it was a matter of just getting a place at the table. I mean, saying this is an issue, is like, really, is it? Yeah, it is. Right? For some subject areas, we move beyond that. Luckily, it's not a question of if, it's a more question of how now, and that's nice.
So looking at that, and also recognizing the experience that you've had in the space, what is the key thing that is different today compared to, let's say, 2015?
I think what's really striking me as different is that it's a different kind of dialogue we're having now. Completely different kind of dialogue. We spend, I feel like, an inordinate amount of time discussing if, right? Making the business case, and how do we make this relevant for business, and just to get a seat at the table, right? And there, a lot of focus and a lot of energy was spent on doing that, and not enough was spent on, okay, if it is an issue, what do we then do about it? And that's where I feel the conversations are much more interesting and rewarding now, and the work that is being done is more impactful, if you will, because we're moving stones now. We're talking about which are the most important things to address, because we want to address something. We want to do something right now, and that's a much more tangible discussion and a much more interesting discussion. So it's about, how much does it cost? What do we do first? What do we do second? Who do we involve? Right? These kinds of questions, which are also rewarding from a consultant point of view, because really, at least I feel as a sustainability consultant or a decarbonization consultant, what you want to do is you want to make a difference. You want to find difficult problems and find good solutions that get traction.
And that's the other side of it, right? Because I think something we spoke about in the sauna just now is this: as a consultant, you like difficult problems. you're probably a problem solver if you are a consultant, or at least a management consultant. So really, the topic that you're going to solve problems within could be any topic. And now we just work coincidentally with decarbonizing the healthcare sector, but really any person who's great at problem solving and hypothesis-based problem solving can actually do a good job here.
Yeah.
But
I think that is a great point, and I think
it's your own point. So
no, well, we discussed it. It's anybody's point, but I think it's a great and interesting point, especially at this juncture, right? Because a lot of there's a lot more traction, but there's also now I feel when you look at the market and when you look at each and every organization trying to do something, a lot of problems arise out of not being able to hire or not feeling you have the right capabilities. In the consultant world, there's a lot of talk of there's a lot of newcomers to the scene, right? Mm-hmm. So we see a lot of consultancies pivoting, building up the sustainability departments. And I've even seen on LinkedIn a lot of posts around what are the right qualifications for a sustainability consultant. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of educational background, what kind of experience should you have? And what kind of job should you do? Because what is proper consulting in sustainability and what's not proper? And I found myself finding some affinity to that, like what I've been doing this for so long, and now a lot of people are coming in and so on. So I've been able to sort of connect to that, but then reflecting on it myself, I'm like, well, it's a straw man. I mean, we're consultants. If we're good at problem solving. And second, this problem is big. And it needs all of us. So it's not going to be sitting and solved with a few highly specialized folks that feel they have the only answer. Mm-hmm. In fact, like we talked about, I think the solution is making everybody a sustainability consultant, or every role today is a sustainability role. We used to say that, but I think in truth it is. Mm-hmm. So if you're in procurement, well, you need to understand what's the sustainability angle of a procurement, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have the same job you used to have. There's a new layer to that, and in that way, we get the scale and the impact that is needed. Mm-hmm. We can't solve it with the current set of assets, current set of consultants out there, and the current capabilities in the organizations. We need to scale and leverage.
One of the things you have talked about that is a drive of interest for you is that what we do in Green Innovation Group is we focus on decarbonization of the healthcare sector, and that we're actually experts in both. So you could say we kind of have that profile where we all know a lot about the healthcare sector, and we know a lot about sustainability, and combined, that just means that specialization is actually allowing for some problem solving that gets both complex and interesting. But it also means that we're actually able to help our clients move the stones, and sort of at the end of the day, you can say, because we do understand what are the barriers and what are the obstacles that they live.
Yeah, no, and I think when you look at the consultant marketplace, if you will, right, there are different types of companies that do different things, and I think the enormous joy I have of joining Green Innovation Group is that you have given yourself the privilege, and your clients, you're given the privilege that you're going to be, you're specialized. You know this industry, you know this sector, and you know decarbonization. It's a very clear message, and it's something that's very valuable, I think, for clients, that you are able to jump into the sector without having to get to know it first. Mm-hmm. And that, I mean, sometimes is the case. You got to be honest as a consultant, especially if you're the bigger companies. Sometimes, well, you got to start somewhere, right? And that's a huge advantage that you have as here in Green Innovation Group. And I'm I find personally the what is called for now when we look ahead is that kind of solutioning. You need to understand the sector really, really well and able to guide properly and identify and solve the problems in the right way. And for that to happen, well, you need to be fairly specialized. at least as consultants, I think, to be able to provide that value at the level that is required.
And if we're looking at, I think you're absolutely right that we need that specialization. We also need to have that industry focus, so we don't get too caught up in what are the complexities in the building sector around making that sustainable, and then turning into an API production company and having to kind of translate some of the problems you've seen in other sectors and into the API industry, where it's just very different. And the more you know about that one industry, the easier it is for you to have an overview over the common challenges that they're facing. But I'm curious to know, now you've been involved in a couple of the projects that we've been doing, what is the common challenge that you're seeing for decarbonization of the healthcare industry? What is the problem we need to solve in the private sector?
I think it's interesting that more so than other sectors, because I think it's different, but it's also the same, right? But what is I think especially prevalent in pharma and in healthcare in general is the fact that when you talk about formulations, when you talk about the products, they're locked in for so long. Mm-hmm. So it can, once you've set sort of the design. So in under the industry, you talk about the design principles, right? So and there you would have shorter lead and lag times between you deciding how a product should look and then it getting to market and changing it. So where in a lot of industries you see a lot of focus on developing the new products and that is a fairly fast way to go to market, then in the life sciences, it's something that is a special feature, that you have this quite significant lock-in effect, if you will, that you really got to be mindful of about how you manage that whole R&D process, how you manage your clinical trials, that whole process, because it matters so infinitely much. I mean, you have to multiply it by your target group size, and then 30 years, something like this. I mean, it's really dramatic, the difference that makes. And I think that's what's the same but pretty unique for the healthcare and life sciences industry, that you have this feature. So that's one of the big things. That's one of the big ticket items. And then I think the second big ticket item is that whereas in other industries you see peaks and troughs, it's pretty unidirectional. I mean, health and life quality.
Humans like it.
I mean, we like it, right? And it matters so much, and we spend an enormous amount of our resources committing to this for obvious reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So that's another feature. It's that's what separates it in some ways from other industries as well, is that it's something that it is just growing in significance. I mean, it's already a big share, like, we talked about 5% of the global emissions, right? But and rising, and that's the thing, it's rising, right? Because it's so important for us humans to have that life quality, obviously, and that is the foundation, right? To be healthy and well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we're also looking at it, and we're seeing that if it was a country, the healthcare industry would actually be the 5th biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And we are also seeing that life expectancy is on the rise and the middle class is growing. And one of the key things people want to spend money on as they get access to more resources is actually health. So there's a reason to believe that we need to decouple the growth of the healthcare sector to the greenhouse gas emissions associated to it. So I think that's really true. And then another thing that we have talked a lot about is tying those efforts from the folks that are passionate about sustainability and the executives that are ambitious about sustainability, tying those goals and ambitions into an actual operating model that is scaling the sustainability professionals inside the organizations, because most of these major pharma players, they have been quite used to compliance and regulatory measures. So they do already have reporting structures and organizations set. So they have a relatively high degree of transparency internally, but it's not always deployed, and it's not always that the line worker on the factory floor actually understands that they're part of a sustainability transformation. So what do you see as the challenge in sort of making a sustainability strategy operational?
I think when we, and I think comes the observation comes in part from in large part from engaging a variety of players in the industry, and that has to do with the fact that it's still early days, right? So it's still defining the problem and defining the solutions is still something that feels rather new. I mean, it is breaking new ground in how do we break this down in procedures? How do we break this down in processes, and whom should be doing what? And oftentimes, we've only just begun seeing how you're going from, when you talk about organizing sustainability, you see this development where it often starts centralized, right? And then maybe it starts by certain functions adapting certain things, right? But we're still not where it's massaged into every function. So it's just part of the job description. Every job description has, this is the angle that you're working on. This is your contribution to the overall agenda. And I think that's where we are right now, is that we are somewhere between moving from this centralized unit that's doing something, and then the commercial organization going to market and meeting demands in terms of, what's the footprint of this product. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't have that, and we didn't think about that when we did it, and revelations like, oh, shoot, packaging, huge in medicines, right? Because it's such a big part of the footprint, right? And so realizations, in a sense, like, oh, there's something we can work on there. So we're still in early days in terms of exploring and finding and defining what are the key parameters that we need to work on. And then, of course, there's the bigger scale things of API and biologics and how production processes are set up, etc. Right. So those are some big ticket items as well.
And something that I've been really impressed with your ability to is also to help the client shape a business case and understand this is the value at stake. If we don't fix this problem, this is what it's going to cost us not to move and act on this agenda. So I think that's
I'm a bit of a nerd in that sense. I mean, I'm an economist by trade, and what I tell my kids is, if you can do math, because it's how I live my life. I mean, I love engaging people, but I also love sitting with a spreadsheet and looking. It feels a little bit like solving a murder mystery. Looking at the numbers and finding the solutions there. What do they tell us? These numbers. I mean, what's hidden in there? And that's really what the business case is about, is to sort of say, well, we know the effects are these, or the implications of these, but understanding the size of them, what's more important, and how do they impact each other? What's the correlation like? What is the causation like? And putting some numbers to that can be like a revelation. When you look at packaging, the revelation around packaging comes from sizing it up and putting numbers to it. And then you realize, oh my God, this was much more important than we maybe actually thought. And in other cases, oh, well, maybe it's not such a big issue after all, and we spend less resources. So you're much better at allocating your resources once you understand the business case or the value at stake, or quantifying, really, which is sort of the theme here, quantifying what you're doing. So that's what I love doing, because it feels like solving a riddle every time.
Yeah. And that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Why we get up in the morning and go to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for sharing a bit of yourself, Chris, and welcome to the team.
I'm looking forward.
Really exciting to have you on board.
Thanks.
Hello, and thank you so much for listening in to this episode of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. It really means the world to us that you're listening in and that you're sharing the podcast as much as you're doing already. We are the top 5% most shared podcast on Spotify, and that is just a tremendous honor that you think the content is so good that you would actually share it with your network. So thanks a lot for that. Please remember that if you subscribe and rate the podcast, it makes it easier for us to get interesting people on board and have them guest the podcast and share their insights with you. So if you would please subscribe and rate the podcast, that would mean the world world to us. Also, if you have feedback for us, we're always really, really happy to receive it, to listen to it, and to improve on the show and to improve your experience with the show. So thanks a lot for listening in. Have a great day out there.